Good morning, everyone. So today we are going to talk on something very, very important, just not responsible AI, but we'll go deep into adaptive, responsible AI, adaptive government, cognitive experiences, and AI governance. So starting with this, so this is very normal. We have heard it and we have seen that how there are three major risks when you do not implement responsible AI. And I call it revenue risk, reputational risk, and regulatory risk. Regulatory risk and revenue risk can again be handled to a large extent, but reputational risk is something that once it occurs, it is completely gone for a toss. Somebody writes it on Twitter or Instagram and Facebook, there is no going back, right? And that is multiple times reputationally and regulatory risk combined together. Now, does it make a business sense to have a responsible AI system in place? So there have been surveys which talks about responsible AI approach earns twice as much profit compared to those without. And there has been a lot of other surveys which value this market at $2.76 billion. Now, I will not go by figures, but we need to understand a simple non or irresponsible behavior can lead to a huge cost, which are by these three risks. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard this news, but this talks about lot in AI governance and responsible AI. A girl was raped in metaverse and a teenager commits suicide after falling in love with a AI character, which is a chatbot or an LLM model. Now, these two are very, very scary. These two have just surfaced, but there can be multiple and many other similar incidences which questions the entire existence of responsible AI and AI governance. A lot of time we say that we practice responsible AI, but generally we don't, right? So a rose by any other name should smell as a rose. So you call it AI ethics, trustworthy AI, ethical AI, AI governance, transparent AI, responsible data science, or AI governance, it's all the same. Different people call it by different name, and I just wanted to clarify when I'm talking about all of these under one umbrella. And again, RAI across the world, we have seen EU AI Act, Singapore has some act which has a fine associated with it. OECD, China, India, and Australia also are coming up with very stringent policies when it comes to responsible AI. Right? I'll not go in the nitty-gritties of each act, but this is to show that there exist some policies, but again, these are all half-baked. So now what is an RAI framework? And I believe RAI framework has three parts. Number one are principles. The main principle is social well-being and planet inclusiveness. Whatever you do in AI, you do it for people, you do it for environment, and you do it for society. So social well-being and planet inclusiveness is the first thing. Second is privacy and safety, of course. Fairness and equity, I'm not going to deep dive. There has been a lot of talks which happened on fairness and equity. Robustness and stability. Now, this is very interesting. You go to, say, any LLM model, you write, who is the CEO of Core.ai, it will give you a name. You write again, it will give you another name. And then you write the name and say that, please confirm, is this the CEO of Core.ai? And you say, oh, I'm so sorry, it's not the right answer. So stability is a very, very important area of concern when it comes to LLM models, especially for researchers, especially for children who are using it to facilitate their daily working. Accountability, if something goes wrong, whose neck do you need to hold? And transparency. Still there, I applied for a small loan from Monzo. They declined, and then I told why. They told, okay, this is our system which has done. And I asked them multiple times, tell me why. They were not able to tell me. Right? So transparency is not there. Similarly, how do you enable this principle? You enable this principle by APIs, codes. You have a chief RAI officer. You create education and training program, and you create adoption toolkits for something like governance toolkits, canvases, certifications, and so on and so forth. And then you have something called synthetic data to test everything which you're talking about. Right. This is a complex diagram, but this is just to show that at every stage of a data science life cycle, from business problem to deployment, there are governance and RI principle which needs to be implemented. There is not a single area where you can't say that RAI principle can be ignored or does not have a space for responsible AI, right? Similarly, there are a couple of enablers. As I told you, you should have enablers for model and data privacy. Agnostic fairness. What I mean by agnostic fairness, be it any use case under the sun, you should be able to test for fairness. Transparency, which is for an LLM model. Now, I wrote beyond explainability. Explainability we always define through Lyman Sharp. Now, that's incomplete. You need to talk about data, model, counterfactual, risk, and so on and so forth. It has to be an end-to-end explainability in a simple language which your mom or even your grandmother can understand, not in some gibberish statistical language. Then comes drift, and then you have stability and hallucination. We talked about that, and privacy. When an LLM, for example, if you have a RAG model in a company and you ask me, tell me everything about Sray, it can give you my phone number, right? How do you ensure that my privacy of my phone number or address or my spouse name, everything is kept in the right shape and form, right? Now, we have talked about responsible AI a lot, but responsible AI in silo does not make any sense. It has to get into some system called AI governance. So AI governance is critical to translate AI and data investment into meaningful value in responsible and risk-free manner, right? So how do you take responsible AI and put it on the table where people are able to govern it? Right. So why do we need an AI governance system? So AI governance system has couple of things which it will handle. First, it will handle risk management. Any kind of risk in AI model, any kind of risk in system would be handled by AI governance. And we'll come and talk about the AI governance and how we should make it in few minutes. Ethical oversight. So we talked about responsible AI. Now these people or this body would look into that, is it being implemented end to end continuously, or it was just on papers. Regulatory compliance. So regulations are changing every day. As we speak, regulations are changing. So this body again need to check that bare minimum, are we meeting regulatory compliance or not? But this is not the one thing which they need to maintain. It has to go above regulatory compliance. I always believe that regulators are on the back seat of the car. They need to come on the front seat of the car. So still, regulatory compliances are 20 years or 10 years behind the technology advancement which are happening. So just implementing regulatory compliance would not be enough. Right? Transparency and accountability, and then building trust. Trust for all the stakeholder, be it internal stakeholder or external stakeholder, be it through documentation, practices, processes, and ways of working. So building trust is one of the most important thing. Now, how do you develop? So we have changed this diagram. So we use start with, this is not clear, but this is human centricity, compliance, everything is the core. Then you design something, develop something, deploy something, and post, and then you monitor something, which is post deployment. However, between develop and deploy, there has to be a governance body which will check for everything. You will have a responsible AI canvases, you will have a maturity assessment, you will have a certification, and this certification would look like something called human oversight. We'll have sections for monitoring, we'll have section for data input, we'll have section for environment, would have section for misuse, would have section for fail-safe measures, and so on and so forth. Now, this is one of the most important things which I believe. So when you talk about a responsible AI committee, it has to be interdisciplinary. It cannot have only one kind of people. It need to have, say, data scientists, engineers, it needs to have lawyers, ethics expert, it need to have CXO, product owners, everyone. So this is how AI councils should look like, where you have you operating in between while you're talking to everybody and they are exchanging ideas. Similarly, at the stages of data science lifecycle, when you identify use case, when you create data governance policy, when you approve your model, when you deploy your model, when you monitor your model, when you version your model, when you knowledge management and responsible AI, what are the responsibility for different stakeholder? So which is RACI. responsible, accountable, consulted and informed. How do each of them play a role? Now, this is not set in stone, but this is for high clarity, so that people would not say that, okay, I was not aware, this was not my job, and they will not keep passing the ball to each other, right? So this kind of framework, which you can modify as per your system, as per your organization, gives a very high clarity to any kind of organization and to any kind of body. Right. So similarly, I talked about certifications. A certification is simple, is a set of 80, 90 questions, which assesses a project on basis of different RAI principles, something like business alignment, social well-being, fairness, stability, and tells you how do you score, and also tells you how do you score in different countries, say Australia, or say European Union, Brazil, Singapore, Canada, UK, and so on and so forth. So this is not something to be displayed outside. This is for internal consumption. So before a project goes out, AI governance body or AI COE or RAI COE, anything you call it, need to get into this and need to make sure that every project is certified before it goes for deployment. Right. Now, the most important and newest thing is called cognitive compliance. So when you fusion or when you mix advanced AI along with ethical frameworks, so what we mean by advanced AI, say LLM model or generative AI or generative AI or agentic LLM model and anything which will come in next couple of years with ethical frameworks. Now here, for example, talk about hallucination, stability, robustness, privacy, toxicity, and everything. So when you merge these two and you just not follow ethical guidelines, but you follow a broader term of checklist or broader terms of guardrails, which has human values all around it, because you are doing anything which human are using it. Now that will lead to something called cognitive compliance. People also call it cognitive RAI or cognitive, practices, ethical practices. Similarly, now this is very interesting. We started with something called teenager being raped or teenager committing suicide. Now that is where we need to understand no policies exist in the earth right now which talks or have children into AI system. And take my word, children are the biggest consumer of AI system in the world. Your kids, your cousins, or everybody uses AI more than you and I are using it. So AI remains half-baked till the time you do not have children as their representative, because they are the biggest stakeholder and they are the biggest user. So you need to bring them in, you need to bring guardians in, you need to create a human in the loop system, have right kind of cognitive and emotional well-being of your youngest users. I don't know if you know or not, recently Instagram came out with Instagram for children, where parents can put checks on Instagram for their children account, where they can talk about who will be added to their account, what kind of reels would be there, they would be looking at, and so on and so forth. So I guess that's one first step into the world when it talks about a app meant for children, and it will gradually be open up as the children grow up, right? Okay, so why is AI governance tough? Number one, there is no global regulation. So Canada has its own regulation, US has its own regulation, Europe has its own regulation, Singapore has its own, Israel has its own. Everybody's regulations are different. There's not a single unit which talks about a comprehensive AI regulation, and it's not going to happen also in next, say, 50 years or more, right? Cross-department integration. So if you work in your company, the IT does not agree with, say, engineering. Engineering does not give respect to data science. Data science don't care about the product team. The product does not care about the finance. The finance does not care about the governance. Governance do not care about the legal, and so on and so forth. So there is no cohesiveness among different multiple teams or multiple departments in the company. And that's what is the second bottleneck for creating a AI governance body. Third is evolving standards. Today you sit down, create a set of standards. By the time you put it in your company, spread it out, the regulations and standards have changed, right? So for example, I remember when we were creating standards for LLM model, the moment we published into our company, 2 days later, agentic LLM came into being. So it is so tough to keep a track of what is happening that just because of evolving standards, things are changing so fast, you'll not be able to create something called a set in stone policy. It has to be very, very flexible. And that's the third most biggest bottleneck for any kind of AI governance, responsible AI, whatever you like to call, right? The next very important thing is red teaming. Now, what is red teaming? Red teaming is a group of people who would hack into your system, something like ethical hackers or ethical attackers, and create stress testing scenarios, create scenarios to take, break the models for fairness, privacy, explainability, hallucination, stability, and so on and so forth. And it will always try to do that till the time the system is foolproof before it goes for deployment. Now, this has been a very dominant practice in cybersecurity and other areas, but this needs to come into AI model also. Now, especially given adversarial attacks and others are happening every now and then. Okay. Never have AI ever. Now, this is a very interesting thing. So when you talk about AI, you need to understand what are the things your AI model would not do. Number one, never violate user privacy. That's the first thing it will create. If you have given consent for using your data, you should also have a right to call back. You can call back or write an email that, hey, I am done with you using my data. I want you to delete all the data. And the AI system should give you that freedom, right? Never make biased or discriminatory decisions. So be it decision based on race, gender, disability, it should not discriminate people for that matter. Never act autonomously without human intervention in critical scenarios. Now, this is very interesting, but the gray area is critical scenarios. If it is predefined that these are the critical scenarios, well, good enough. If it is not defined and you are not using, people would say, oh, this was not a critical scenario and this is a critical scenario. Never engage in manipulation or misinformation. Again, so something like deep fake or creating images using generative AI and saying that these are real, so these should not be done. All the images on my slide are by an AI tool, right? LLM evaluators. So how many of you have heard about this term, LLM as a judge? So LLM as a judge is very simple. It is a different LLM model would judge an existing LLM model that how robust it is, right? And so it will check another LLM model will check the existing LLM model for stability, consistency, and explainability. Now, what is the use of this? So when you have an LLM evaluator, you don't need a human, or the time taken by human to evaluate something reduces. You can scale it. You can evaluate hundreds of LLM model at one go within a couple of minutes or hours, and then you have consistency. So for example, if I and you are sitting and evaluating an LLM model, you'll say, okay, this is 7 out of 10, okay to be deployed. I may say 3 out of 10. So there is no consistency because of a lot of differences. So this LLM model as a judge would have consistency. It will evaluate an existing system under couple of criteria which are predefined without any prejudice or any kind of bias or any kind of cultural or personal influences. Third, explainability. Sometimes when somebody asks you, why did you take this decision? A lot of time we do not have an answer, right? We are not able to articulate why did we do that. An LLM model as a judge can not only tell you why, but also can tell you why not. So these are very, very important. So an AI governance committee can help bridge the gap by, number one, auditing AI systems. So a complete audit policies, which we saw, RACI matrix and governance and everything, and evaluation, providing oversight for continual improvement, that every time something comes in, They know that these are the changes which need to be done going forward. Of course, human in the loop is something which cannot be ignored at any given point of time. And this is something which I always like, adaptive governance. We started with something where we talked about kids and we talked about regulatory changes. Now, these are very, very recent phenomena. These are something which are happening very, very recently and which are ever changing. Today, there has been a case of teenager being abused in metaverse, a kid committing suicide, and her mother fighting case with the company which has done. And there is no law which exists, and there has been no prosecution. And then every day, EU AI Act has changed, I guess, 2 or 3 times. White House Charter has changed a couple of times. Singapore is coming out with new regulations every now and then. So when everything changes so much, what is one thing you need to do? You need to practice something called adaptive governance. So everything we talked about, nothing should be set in stone, nothing. Everything should be modularized. So you can pick up a module and replace the module. It has to be very, very agile, right? So that agility would give you flexibility of taking out something and changing something. That is what is the next era. 2025 should be will be all about adaptive governance and flexibility in AI governance. And that's where I talked about interdisciplinary people. So for example, a person like me may not understand new legal laws are coming in. So you need to have a lawyer or say a legal expert, an ethics expert, a product person, maybe a CXOs, a technician, so an engineer, a data scientist, and many other people who come together and form this committee. The most important talk about this adaptive governance also that these are chairs, not people. There should not be one person assigned to a role. There should be one role assigned to a role. Now that's also part of adaptive governance. So today I would act as a chief RAI officer. Tomorrow somebody else in my absence, or I'll be replaced. Then I may be brought back in. So adaptive governance is about creating something called stewards or champions in your company, where 100 of people are trained to become RAI champions, responsible AI champions, responsible AI stewards, who are able to do this, take this decision whenever required. They are able to, create a fast moving they are able to create an adaptive governance policies and framework in a fast moving regulatory environment. And that is very, very important. You cannot have people, you cannot have modules, you cannot have policy which are set in stone or is sacrosanct. They has to be flexible and they need changes. You need to have the right kind of red team, you need to have right kind of policies, you need to have right kind of enablers, API, canvases, certifications, and everything to enable. And also you need to ensure that not only children, but people who are senior citizens, people who are disabled, people who have problem with mental illness and everything are taken into consideration before you create any kind of policies. And I'll pause from here. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll see you around.